So when we're talking about comprehensiveness, you can look at breadth of information, depth, as well as additional features that the discovery may want to include. But when you're looking at the breadth of information, well, the early discovery systems, one technique was you collect as much data as you can, you put it in, and that create a central index, and then that central index becomes the universe within which the users are searching. Unfortunately, what we found is the library collections, and as even Graham pointed out in a couple of his slides, often expand beyond that universe. So the challenge then becomes to the discovery vendor to be able to search the central index alongside of, shall we say, remotely indexed information, or using widgets or other techniques, so that when the user types the query, you're truly going across the breadth of the collection and you're servicing in some way results that are meaningful to the user. When you look at depth, that could be the depth as in you've got a journal and you want to make sure that everything from volume 1 to issue 1 is indexed, as well as the depth of the metadata, the quality of the metadata that you provide. The more information that's in there in the metadata, the better the chance of quality discovery and getting brought up to the top of the result list. And a lot of the discovery services today are replacing the traditional library catalog. So the expectation of the library community is that you are going to be able to do things like real-time circulation availability, holdings lookups, place loans, reserves, as well as integrate with other productivity tools, reference managers, ProSite, EndNotes, those kinds of things. So as discovery vendors, we're also developing a lot of those kinds of tools as well. And then we look at relevance, and then this is the challenge of how do you go from having hundreds of millions or billions even of items indexed to getting the right 3 for the user, because their attention span isn't going to go beyond that. I know we have a product manager that does nothing but search. And then he's got a technical product manager who's an expert, and they work with a bunch of teams, and they're looking at search logs and doing a bunch of analysis and these sorts of things. Like, how do you tweak and tune? And this is, if you're ever looking for a career that has a long life, I think that's going to be one, because we're not in a position where we're going to say, well, by next October, we will have solved the problem. It's an incremental improvement, and things keep changing, things keep moving. So one of the things we're looking at is how do you get the most relevant articles to show first? And then one of the techniques is to use and take advantage of the subject indexing, because too often the title and even the abstract may not actually have the relevant topical terms in the text to be discovered. So using the subject is good. So I've got a quick example here where, in this case, the second result is bubbled up. The search was for multiple personality disorder, and this one bubbled up because of the words in the subject. And it's really more than that. In fact, the words in the subject are actually given a little more relevance than the words elsewhere, so it helps kind of sift out things in the noise. But it's actually more than that as well, because your users don't always know, well, firstly, they don't always know how to spell, but they also don't always know the appropriate and proper terms. They're not indexers. So the tools today need to make that sort of mapping or transition or translation of what the user typed to the proper terms, and then actually use the proper vocabulary in the searching and bring it up. And that proves to be fairly effective. So another thing that we found is you have the single search box, you've got your hundreds of millions of things to be searched, but for some institutions with offering multiple disciplines of study, you find that that may not be quite precise enough. So another approach is to look at subsetting that information in a way. And so I'll just show you a quick example here. In this case, again, we've done the multiple personality disorder, but we've selected a psychology discipline. And so the resources that are under the hood in the Discovery Service, and some of these can even be remotely indexed things, have been classified under that discipline, and then that is what the search is limited to. So you get a good mix of results. In this case, most of these results are academic papers. So a lot of times, just by sheer volume, information that gets indexed in these discovery indexes tend to be newspaper articles. And so you can get a lot of noise. This is one way of kind of removing some of the noise from the system. University of Liverpool took a little different approach, and you can see there's a link in the center, which you probably cannot read, but it says browse database by subject or title. And in this case, if you click the link, the user gets a drop box. We're going to select engineering, and now the discovery box returns, but it's labeled or branded Discover Science and Engineering. So any term that's searched in there is now on those related disciplines, and so users have a better chance of getting the results that the librarians are hoping they're going to go for. The other thing that this is useful for is I think a lot of faculty members like to put search boxes and things on their course pages. So these kinds of techniques are good because you can, shall we say, pre-tailor the search, this discovery search, to a specific discipline and help guide the users to the right resources. Then there's the question of answers versus results. And is a user coming to a discovery service to get an answer or to get some results? And the answer is, of course, both. Sometimes they know exactly what they're looking for. Sometimes they don't have a clue what they're looking for. Other examples are in a point of care environment, a healthcare provider might be looking for information on how to treat a certain condition versus research on the treatment of the condition, which is totally different things, right? And so I think all of the discovery vendors are getting more into these kinds of technological improvements using studies of web logs and these sorts of things. What are our users looking for? And then how do we adapt? So in this case, the search was for Stockholm Syndrome. We don't really know what this user is trying to do when they run that search. But what we've done is, because of the popularity of the term, there's actually been what's called a research starter that's been created at the very top of the screen. The user can click in and go into kind of an encyclopedic entry that describes what this is. So if you've been assigned to do research on Stockholm Syndrome, this gives you a quick primer on what it's about, and then may guide your further research. And another example, surprisingly enough, one of the searches that appears in like the top 100 in EBSCO's discovery is Web of Science, or PubMed, or Web of Knowledge. You present users with a search box, they type stuff in, right? And so in this case, the goal here is to say, well, are you looking for a database? I mean, you may be looking for research about something about Web of Science, but the chances are you're looking for Web of Science. And so this is there. It includes a link to the product. And it's actually another interesting way of kind of integrating back in some of these remote resources where people are searching for things in discovery because it's supposed to be everything, right? Journal names, same sort of thing. So you get this crosswalk between the article discovery and an A to Z list by being able to, combine the two and anticipate what the user is trying to do. Then full text. And full text matters to end users. Full text accessing it obviously matters to your publishers. So one of the challenges, again, with full text is, our situation with EBSCO is that we actually have full text we host. A number of publishers license as full text, we host it. But that's not the library collection. It's part of the library collection, but it's not the entire library collection. So you've got to be able to work beyond that and provide the user with access to the linked full text, as we call it. And for a number of years, there's been technologies where you use like an article knowledge base, an article link knowledge base, and do dynamic discovery of the links and display the links. And so this, I know we're no longer the only ones that do this because someone just added it recently. But the idea of bringing in both the PDF and the linked full text within the result experience. And on either of those cases, if the user clicks the link, they get directly to the full text. They really don't care where the full text is, but they get directly to the full text. And the other thing on the left, you can see the limit to box. And in this case, our user has limited to what they think is full text. So from a searching and technology perspective, the discovery service has to understand not only what's hosted in full text that might be in the databases that are under the covers, but also what's available in the library collection and available remotely through linking. So, if we're talking about success, I think it's fair to say success for the publisher is having users, A, discover your content, B, access your content, and then, of course, being recognized for the positive impact or value your content has to the community. So, what can you do to help? So if we're looking at discoverability, it's about the metadata, and we've been hearing this in the previous two talks as well, is make the provision of metadata to outside search engines, discovery engines, make that a priority, not necessarily a top priority, but it shouldn't be an afterthought. It shouldn't be, somebody in marketing puts together a title list, once every 6 months and updates things. Include the abstracts, include the subject terms, include the author keywords, include all the additional data that you might think might help that article be found. But be a little careful, don't overload the author keywords with every word you can think of in the topic area, because then you just turn your content into noise, and then it kind of has the reverse effect that you want. And don't put the journal name in the subject heading, because nobody's going to be helpful at all if they're looking for your journal. And every article from, that's not what they're looking for, right? And the A&I indexes are not going away, at least not for some time. And they're the ones that are spending the time to, they select the quality materials. As Graham said, you direct a user to PsycInfo, you direct them to CINAHL, because you know that the stuff you find there is really on topic. So if you have journals that are appropriate for these indexes, approach them, try to get included, and make it easy for them to get the data so that they can take and add them. Because it's another exposure, and typically when those indexes are included in the discovery, like we do, then they're in both the secondary tier of discovery, but also the primary tier. And I think over time, you're going to see more of those indexes make their way into the primary discovery. And then it's really about the value that they add by both the branding, the quality of the brand of being in that index, but also the subject and classification schemes that they apply. And then improving access. So now they've found your stuff, then the question is, how do you go and you get the user to it? So link resolvers are still around. Make sure that you're providing KBART lists. Make sure those lists are up to date. Again, every 6 months probably isn't good enough. Your new journals will not be found. Your old journals will lead to dead links and frustration. If you have open access journals, identify those on the KBART lists. If you have open access articles, there's now, NISO has a best practice for identifying those within the metadata. So the more advanced link resolvers and discovery systems are going to be able to take that information and actually surface the link to your version of the content without the user, the library, having a subscription because it's available open access. And I say, well, then make sure you go to a URL or a DOI to the article and try to keep those as simple as you can and forgiving. And that's more of a technological issue. And it's also the being smart about authentication plays into that as well. There are some larger publishers where if I'm trying to access an article via IP authentication or Athens or Shibboleth authentication, these single sign-ons, the link syntax is entirely different for each of the three cases. And it's not standard across one publisher to the next. So ANI lists and other things are going to be have great difficulty in creating the right links. So be aware of that. And I see I'm being quacked now, right? So.
Actually, I promise not to quack, but if you want to take a couple more minutes.
So I got 2 or 3 more slides I think that are helpful. So how do you measure your success? You go to the trouble of providing, something like EBSCO or ProQuest, your metadata, and is it a good deal or not? And, so the question is, how do you measure? And, one thought is you look at your web logs. You look at your web logs, and as Karen was pointing out, you take the referrer and you find out where your users are coming from. Well, a couple things. Your users aren't always going to your copy of the full text. They may be going to the copy that you provided to an aggregator, but they may also be going to a copy that sits in an institutional repository. Or they may be coming to you through Crossref, through a competitor's of the Discovery Services link resolver, or from the link resolver to Crossref through a proxy server to the point which you don't know where they came from. And so that makes it very difficult. So the kinds of things we think you should be looking at is how many full text articles were retrieved from the hosted full text. How many link outs did that discovery service send to the publisher's site? How many link outs went to a link resolver? How many times did a user either look at the detail of the article or somehow click on it using the counter result clicks or record views? Because with something like that, you're going to be able to take a look and say, well, in this service, we had this many result clicks, which is kind of expression of interest in our stuff. But that only led to this many full text retrievals or link outs. And so you can use that to gauge maybe how effective the provision of subject data is or how well it's being searched. And further on that topic is maybe it's time for a counter report, and we're going to be pitching this, and hopefully if there's interest, please let me know. But this would be like a Publisher Discovery Report 1 where the discovery vendors or ANI services, for example, could be obliged to provide a standard report that shows the key metric types for your content on their service. So now that you have apples to apples comparison that you can use in conjunction with your web logs and your own search analysis to see where the traffic is. So the quick wrap up for me is oh boy, it's like pulling the fire alarm. That's really getting bad, you know it's bad. So making sure that you're providing the metadata, and in its good quality metadata. Check your links and authentication. Make sure that you're not introducing unnecessary barriers between that point of discovery and the actual success of getting to the article, and think standards and best practices. Karen, or Martha rather, will have talking about a few of those in her session, so we'll leave it there. Thank you very much.